Today, we have Christine Miles again in the studio. And the reason for that is because usually I'm your host, author of North Korea Deception and Hyde Park Deception. But today, I've invited my friend Christine Miles to interview me as Hyde Park Deception is launching this month, October 2021. And so I'm just going to throw it straight over to Christine. Thanks for doing this.
Well, my absolute pleasure. It's nice to turn the tables on you a little bit here.
It's fun.
And I'm excited because I think that we can help the audience get to know you for a change.
Thank you.
Rather than you just getting to know us.
Right.
So you must be excited, the second in your series coming out.
It's very satisfying. As we were saying just before the show started, there's nothing like having your own book, come to fruition. There are literally a gazillion things to do, and I wrote the first one. It was published in December 2020, so it's been kind of a quick 8 months. But it will never fail. I never fail to be amazed of how much there is to do and how much you can still do even as you are publishing. I'm actually enjoying this week now. I promised myself not to get stressed, just to enjoy the launch. And because all the tricky stuff has been done, the editing, it's at the publishers, it's up on Amazon, and so now I'm just going to enjoy and hopefully sell a few copies. There
are a lot of moving parts, and this is so hot off the press. This is the proof book, is it not?
Is. Yeah, black and gold. I like that.
Yeah,
I really like it.
It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
There's already some buzz. You're already getting some pre-orders.
Absolutely,
I understand.
yes,
So I want to learn a lot more about the book and even show your trailer. But I'd like to start first with getting to know you a little bit.
Thank you. Okay, sure.
So, because this is fiction, but it's also a little autobiographical, is it not? Both books.
Yes.
So tell us about yourself. Take us way back. Where did you grow up?
Oh boy. All right. So we grew up in London. Went to Exeter University, studied Russian and German, and I went into the British Army. And
slow down here.
Yeah.
How did that come about? So is that an automatic? Did you decide to do that?
So in Britain, it's a professional army. So no, you chose. So I was sponsored through university. So kind of like I think it's ROTC here in America.
That's right.
So I sort of did that as equivalent. So went to Sandhurst, was sponsored through university. Spent a year of my life in Russia, in Moscow, which is kind of where North Korea Deception began, because we traveled around Russia, and I remember going I asked our KGB minder if we could go on a trip during the Christmas holidays, and he said, no, Richard, we cannot go. And I said, come on, we want to go. He said, 6 days on the train. And I said, yeah, this could be great. And he said, we cannot go to Vladivostok, closed city, which means no foreigners allowed. And so, long story short, I persuaded him to go to Khabarovsk instead, which is a little bit before Vladivostok. And anyway, so that was how actually North Korea Deception came out. Arriving in Khabarovsk, the river was frozen over with ice. This beautiful girl in mink fur coat and hat was greeting us, and I just thought this would be a great setting for a novel. But anyway, so
at the time you thought that?
Yeah. So
wow.
That was way back. That was like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But anyway, so just the pen picture is basically, studied languages, Russian, German at University of Exeter, and then went into the British Army, did Gulf War I, then came back to Germany, and one of the best things that ever happened to me in my entire life, thinking back now, they asked, the British Army was looking for Russian speakers to go and learn Bosnian in London. Now I was in Germany, and I didn't really like it. It wasn't a very exciting place, on a tank park in Germany.
You're an adventurer.
Right, yeah. I want to do something a bit more exciting.
Yeah.
So I was about to do literally the worst job in the British Army, which is unit employment officer, which meant that I had to organize the entire regiment's logistics to get ready, pack up, and fly to Canada for the training in Canada at Bathurst, British Army Training Area at Suffield. And I was so miserable and depressed about that, because it was just a horrible job.
It was not the beginning of a novel in your mind.
No, that was not a novel.
Okay.
And so, lo and behold, they literally out of the blue wanted Russian speakers, and I went, me sir. And anyway, again, long story short, within 3 days, there was one British Army, one Royal Marine, one Navy, one Royal Air Force. We were literally in one of those rooms in the Ministry of Defense in Whitehall with the clocks all around the world. I thought, oh my God, this is like a James Bond movie. And so we were getting ready to not only learn Bosnian, but also to go off. And then that's when they sent me to Russia. Sorry, I'm getting confused now. That was a Russian assignment, so that was kind of different. But anyway, they also wanted Russian speakers to then go and learn Bosnian. So all these things happened.
I'm just trying to get a sense of where this adventurous spirit came from. So, one of the things about your books is you really try to bring the experience to the reader. And that's obvious in the way you talk and the way the books read. So where did this sense of adventure come from? When you were growing up, or your parents?
Man, that's the tough one. Well, I don't know. I just always... I grew up, my mum brought me up alone. She was a single parent. Never really knew my dad, only met him much later on. I just always, like the languages, I think that's maybe where it all began. I remember at age 16, I got the chance to go and do a language scholarship in France and be with a family. And so, I started learning French, and then I did another host family with German. I don't know, I just always wanted to just go off and do my thing.
So those languages kind of connected you to different places.
Big, yeah. Okay. And then when I saw the opportunity at University of Exeter, you could do Russian from scratch. And so I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And then, of course, Russian turned into Bosnian later.
Yeah. So, and created more opportunities for you.
So I guess you could say it was the languages definitely helped me just go off into the world and do stuff. And again, like age 15, I think I remember going off with two friends on what it was called Interrail. I think you guys had it too. And you would buy a train ticket, and you could just get on any train in Europe and just keep going and going and going. And so in those days, there was no cell phones.
Right.
And I just remember going off with a couple of friends. That the worst thing that happened was that we went on these little mopeds, and my friend fell off and broke his little finger, and then we had to go to a hospital. And I was amazed because they treated us in Europe, and it wasn't our country, but they were still giving us treatment. I always thought it was amazing.
So you had all this freedom.
Yeah.
So how does that relate to writing? So you go off and you have all these experiences, and you did some pretty unique things when you were serving in the Army and beyond that you're bringing to us as the reader as well. But what does that have to do with writing in terms of that experiences?
Well, I guess so. So then I went from sort of the sublime to the ridiculous, in as much as when I was serving in Bosnia, I decided I wanted to become an actor. And this was to do with, I just left the Army, I was working for United Nations Television. Then I moved into a feature film called Welcome to Sarajevo with Marisa Tomei and Woody Harrelson. And so I'm still in Bosnia, I've left the Army now. And I just thought, what do I really want to do? Because there were, shelling and sniper fire, and I had a couple of close calls. I just thought, well, hang on a minute, what do I really want to do with my life? And I was working on this movie. And I remember we were in Sarajevo, and this was after the war, but there was still lots of rubble everywhere and bombed out buildings. And I was part of the film crew, the third assistant director. And I saw Woody Harrelson and Stephen Delane. They were sitting on a pile of rubble, and they were like chatting. And I was watching them, and then someone shouted, "Cut!" And I sorry Kevin, that was a bit loud. And they were doing a scene, and I'd done some acting at school and university, but I hadn't really done much filming. And anyway, I just thought that's what I want to do.
That's it.
That's what I want to do.
It clicked.
So then I got a place at the Mount View Theatre School, which I think now is called Mount View Academy of Performing Arts in London. So having done all this Army stuff and UNTV stuff, I just thought now is the time I've got to do what I'm passionate about. Which is expressing through so then acting. So then, sorry to answer your question about writing. So then, so 2, 3, 4 years, I think, and then I moved to America. And I guess I just started, I was reading more. As an actor, I was waiting for the phone to ring. Yeah. And I just, again, it was a similar thing reading a book. I started reading Le Carré more and Daniel Silva and Olin Steinhauer and all these great writers. And I just thought, I've got to try this. So I guess how it started was in between all the acting stuff and the auditions, when you have so much time on your hands and it's like a psychological roller coaster because you're always waiting for the next, audition opportunity. It was a wonderful way to, channel some artistic
and to
energy.
create.
Create.
A lot of people want to write. A lot of people have the dream of making this come true.
Yeah.
So that's part of why I'm asking, to kind of help bridge that gap. But why don't we take a pause there and take a look at the trailer?
Okay.
So the bridge is you kind of enter this world that's unknown. You enter the army, and before you know it, you're doing all these kind of amazing things, including having a lot of close calls. And then you have this moment where it's like, what do I want to do?
Right.
And part of that expression is acting, but also writing.
Yeah.
So take us into part 2 of your story. So we're at Hyde Park Deception.
Yeah.
How did that come to be, and how did you start the writing process?
Yeah. Gosh, such an important question, and I guess I haven't really thought too much about it. But basically, so Jack Steele is a British journalist, but then for book 2, we go back in time, and he's, lo and behold, a United Nations military observer in Bosnia, which I was too. And I guess there's so many things to say, but in a nutshell, Bosnia was the first time I was really in a war zone, because in the Gulf War I hadn't really been in action. Like, there wasn't much shooting. It was all over in 3 days, Gulf War I, if people remember.
Yeah.
So I hadn't really seen much like death and destruction, like real death and destruction. I'd seen burnt out cars and tanks and things like that in near Iraq and Kuwait. But anyway, so here I am in this war zone, and I'm a blue beret, and I'm a young, naive 24-year-old, and I'm thinking, I'm here to help people, and I'm glad I'm a peacekeeper, because I'm not into shooting people. I like the hearts and minds thing, and I speak the language. So, I really wanted to sort of make a difference by getting to know the Bosnian Serbs, the Bosnian Muslims, the Bosnian Croats.
Again, that connection thing.
Yeah, and so I guess and I'm trying to get to your question of why I wrote this story, and I think it was because, in a nutshell, to see the warring factions against each other and shelling each other. And when I arrived in Sarajevo, there were like 1,500 shells a day landing in Sarajevo, and people were dying.
That must have been difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it was terrible. I thought, the UN barrier would sort of protect me, but it actually didn't. I was, again, naive thinking that. But I just found it fascinating that there were these people, they'd all lived together. Sarajevo Winter Olympics, former Yugoslavia, was a wonderful, beautiful country. Everyone, the Muslim background, the Croat, the Catholic, the Serb, Russian Orthodox, those people all got on well. And suddenly here they were fighting each other, trenches, World War I style trenches, 50 yards apart, all around Sarajevo.
Wow.
And I guess I wanted to write about that sort of the fact that how people can suddenly just splinter like that. And I also wanted to write about how, the international community can get it so wrong, and they have no idea what they're doing, and they go into these countries, whether it be, the British Empire, or the Americans or whatever, and they go into these places and they don't speak the language, and they don't really have a plan, a strategy for how to, help these people after the war, say.
Right.
And so the fact that, for example, I think the European community recognized Bosnia, or they recognized Croatia, or they recognized Serbia, or in fact they didn't recognize Serbia, but they recognized these countries, and that really upset things and really caused more war. I don't want to get too complicated, but I give you a real quote from at the very start of the book. to show how, you know, all these meetings, European community, the Americans, the Brits, the French, and they're all trying to have their own opinion of how to solve this war. And so I guess the chaos of war is what I wanted to write about. The fact that, you know, no one really knows the answer. The people have to figure things out for themselves.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
How is writing making a difference? Because you wanted to make a difference when you were there, but how is writing about this making a difference from your perspective?
Well, when I first finished this book or was thinking about writing this book, you know, everyone said, oh, no one's really interested in Bosnia. No one's really interested in former Yugoslavia. And I just thought, well, that's maybe, and it's 20 years old now, isn't it, the war? But I guess, you know, I wanted to show people what can happen, right? So you're in Europe, and little did I ever think that there would be a war in the middle of Europe so close. I mean, it's just across the sea from Italy. It's you know, it's so close to. It was so close to me as a Brit, and I mean, just to give you an example, you know, the war in Bosnia, there was a referendum, and the mainly Muslim Bosnian parliament had this referendum of you know, who they wanted to be in charge, and the Serbs, who are mainly in the rural areas, they said, no, we're going to boycott the referendum. So the outcome of the referendum was the fact that the mainly Muslim Bosnian government won, but it wasn't a true picture, and so the Serbs were, you know, got upset, and they said, no, we're not going to accept that outcome, and then they put checkpoints up around Sarajevo. The police started giving people a hard time, and one thing led to another. Shots fired, more checkpoints. Russia and Serbia proper are helping the Bosnian Serbs. That's how the war began. And so
it's fragile.
It's so fragile. So in other words, democracy is fragile, and I feel like now more than perhaps the last 20 years, you know, America, Britain, Brexit, you know, the government, the last election here, I just feel we just don't realize how fragile democracy is. And in fact, this is in some ways more poignant. My story in Bosnia is actually some ways more poignant than I ever thought it would be, because we Westerners, we don't think of ourselves as having a fragile democracy. Right. We think we know it all.
How does it feel to write about that?
I mean, it's great. I feel like, you know, I'm putting my, and I would always say to people, well, you know, you got to watch out because, you know, I've seen how wars can start.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you get these political divisions. And so, I mean, it's satisfying. It's satisfying.
Why fiction? This is real life. This is obviously not completely autobiographical, although there's some stories that you've lived through, I think, that relate to the book. But why fiction? Why not more of a documentary style? Tell us as writers how you approach this.
Well, so I think I've always been like a storyteller. I enjoy, you know, telling a good yarn. And to me, whether it's reading a book or watching a Netflix series, you know, there's nothing like, you know, sitting there with a glass of wine or a cocktail and just watching a really great thriller or story.
Yeah.
That's just, you know, that's how my mind works. And I'm not so big into, like, you know, say comedies, but I prefer that political thriller conspiracy thing and figuring out all the parts. So that's what I enjoy reading. So obviously that's what I wanted to write about. And but yeah, I guess at some stage I should try and write like the autobiographical.
Well, you could, but it's certainly a lot of fun to read the thriller part as well. So take us through, like, this was a 10-year process.
Yes.
10 years.
For the books.
That's a lot of your life.
It's a lot, isn't it?
So tell us about the writing process. How do you go about it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a labor of love. Obviously, it's a passion. You know, you've got to learn about it. So I think I read, you know, 10 books on how to write a book. Did some courses, started writing.
So you self-taught.
Yeah.
Educated yourself first.
Yeah, okay. I didn't do I even did an evening class. I remember down in Philadelphia, somewhere, like an evening fiction writing course. So you know, you start. So personally, for me, I start with, and I'm going through it now for book 3.
You're already on book 3.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I start out with, the premise. Like, what is the premise of your work? So you've got to be passionate about your premise and your story idea, because if you're not, and you're with that book 10 years,
it's quite a relationship to have, isn't it?
Yeah. So, for example, what I loved about North Korea Deception was this idea of North Korea and Russia and the UN doing stuff in that area, and China. Like, what an interesting part of the world that is. And there was a river called the Tumen River, and no one really knows about what goes on there. And just so that really
that lights you up as you talk about it now.
Right.
So that's some of the things to think about when you're writing. You better believe in what you're writing about and want to learn more as you're creating.
Exactly.
Is that pretty much how it works?
Exactly. And then the Bosnia thing was like, it was so powerful to be and know people who lived and died in Bosnia, and to see how we made a difference, like we, the international community, and how wrong we got it often. And then how the media works in a war zone. So again, I felt strongly about that. And I guess I just wanted to shed some more light on it for people. I mean, it is, as I said, pure commercial fiction. I've made up a story. There's a secret protocol, and there's a, the NATO.
Where does that come from, by the way? Having not written a fiction book, where does all that imagination and all that storytelling and that you're conjuring up, how do you find that to put pen to paper?
Well, I remember my dear old mother used to say, you've got a very vivid imagination. I can clearly remember her saying that at age 7, And in fact, here's a story for you. I think the answer to that question is, you've either got it or you haven't. Because I literally remember age 7 to 9, we, on a Friday afternoon in my primary school, my infant school, you guys call it kindergarten, we call it infant school. Friday afternoon was writing time, and I thought, I'm going to write a book. And it was,
at 7.
Yeah, and it was like cowboys and Indians. It was about cowboys and Indians.
Wow.
And because I love watching cowboys and Indians on TV. And so I remember that was like the best part of the week for me. It was this 2 hours where we were literally left, and I would start writing and writing and writing. And then basically what happened was, after about 3 months of pretty much probably telling the same story in each chapter again and again. Miss Vera Woods, I remember her name. And she had this like scraped back hair, a little bun, and she was a ballet dancer. She was like she taught dance.
Very serious.
Yeah, very serious.
Okay.
And she used to do that to make everyone quiet. Anyway, I remember I took it over to her expecting, a reasonable grade for that day's work, because she would look at it every week. And she got out her red pen and she drew a big line underneath it. She said, "That's the end." She stopped my book. She finished my book for me, and I was just gutted and heartbroken.
I bet.
And I didn't. That's probably why it took me another 20, 30 years to write again, I always say.
Well, that brings up an interesting issue, because for those that write, the criticism of what they put out there is sometimes the worry. So how do you deal with that and overcome that? That's
a really great question. And I just did an interview, and they said, what's the best piece of advice you can give to writers? And here's something for everyone to think about. I told myself when I started writing that there will be people out there who will want to read my work. There will be. And you have to really believe that, because if you don't believe that, it's really tough. And I just got in that frame of mind. I don't know quite how you do it, guys, but I just told myself, there will be people who will want to read about these stories, and Jack Steele and my... It's
part of why you need to believe in it, right? Because if you don't want to learn about it, why would they? So you need both.
Because agents may not. And you get, people, I spent 2 or 3 years trying to get agents and publishers involved, and I got some bites, but nothing major happened. And lo and behold, I just did it all myself, because I'm an indie author. And, I'm in the thousands of people who are reading my books, not tens of thousands like, big time sellers are, but it's still...
But that's a lot of people reading based on how you're... Yeah. It's a slower start, but that doesn't mean you're not getting the readership. Yeah.
So I think, to answer your question, I think that's, you have to first of all believe that people will want to read your stuff. And then,
do you write 2 hours at a time like you did at age 7? Like, I think that's interesting because you had a very specific time you were writing each week.
Right.
Do you still follow that methodology, or is there something different?
So the bulk of these books were done at the Griffin Cafe in Wayne between probably 9 a.m. and noon.
Let's hear it for the Griffin Cafe.
And it was kind of what I call the heyday. There were a bunch of us writers there. I was a journalist, and we just used to spend time doing our thing, writing. And now I've changed now because I spend more time at home and COVID and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So now I like to get up at 5 or 6 and use those sort of golden hours between, say, 5 and 9, 10 when the emails start coming in.
But you do that every day?
No, not at the moment because I've been spending so much time on marketing.
You're at a different point in this book. But when you're in writing mode, is that an everyday endeavor for you?
Yeah. So you want to get, and again, I remember reading a famous writer once said, going on vacation is actually the work side for me because when you're just doing your thing and writing every day, it's kind of easy and you love it.
Yeah.
But then when I had small children, going off on vacation and not being able to write was just really hard.
This is an outlet for you.
Yeah.
So we only have a couple minutes left, but in that, so what do you want us to know? What's the biggest thing you want us to know, and why we want to read this next book?
Yeah. So if you like a good thriller, think conspiracy, think action adventure, think espionage. Set in London and Bosnia and The Hague in the Netherlands. I ended up going to testify at the War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague, so that's sort of part of that.
And something's in the museum, in one of the museums. Your films? Oh,
sorry, yes, yeah. So my films from United Nations TV are actually at the Imperial War Museum in London. Yeah, those documentaries.
You're the real deal. You've done a lot. I mean, actor, journalist in your life. Certainly, I would call you an advocate. You're doing things in the military, father, and husband. So it all here in Philadelphia area. It's wonderful.
Well, that's very kind. That's very kind of you to say so. And it's been interesting.
How's it feel to be on the other side of the table?
Yeah, no, it's fun. It's fun. And let's talk about you for a second, because I do want to finish with you, if we can. This is Christine's book. What is it costing you not to listen? And she is also launching this month, so I just wanted to give you a shout out there.
Yeah.
And then let me just show this because it's exciting.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, this is the proof, so that's why there's that banner over there. And this is actually, for those of you who've been to London, yes, this is the Admiralty Arch near Trafalgar Square. It's not Hyde Park. But I couldn't afford the Getty image for Hyde Park.
That's a very honest answer.
And the lifeguards, the Queen's lifeguard, does file past here in the story, so I thought I could still use that cover.
It's a beautiful cover.
But anyway, I think we are almost out of time. So thank you, Christine.
My pleasure.
For having me. It's kind of tricky wrapping this up.
It is kind of tricky, isn't it?
but you were wonderful. I really appreciate you doing that. And we will see you all next time.